What's up, everybody? My name's Cole. I'm a part-time real estate investor, full-time legacy airline pilot, and a part-time military instructor pilot. Today, I'm going to talk about what I think is a pretty powerful tool starting out, and that is high leverage. It sounds scary. It sounds crazy. I don't always use it, but I have used it a couple times, and this is something that can help you jumpstart your career if it's used correctly. If you use it incorrectly, you're going to go bankrupt, and it's not going to work out, and you're going to be sad, and you may not be able to afford the internet, so you won't even be watching this video much longer anyways. So this is what it looks like. The reason to use a short-term debt solution like hard money, and hard money would basically just be you're going to a private lender. A private lender could be a family, it could be somebody that pooled together money with investors. There's a lot of different ways that they come together, but there's these people out here that literally just hand out money, give out money as an investment to you so you can buy a property without you going through the normal underwriting. So this would eliminate the need for an inspection, an appraisal, all the things that you would normally need, the 45-day-ish closing window that you would need to get a property sold. This would eliminate all of that. Some places can close in as little as a couple days. I've heard of some that are like overnight. The next day they could close on a property. So speed, that's one of the reasons that you would use this. Speed is important in real estate. Sometimes it's what gets you a deal or loses you a deal. The way that would look like it, the way that would work is you would go find a property, find a deal. Let's say they say, hey, we really wanted 130 for this, but this guy is coming up on some situations in his personal finances. He needs to get rid of this property in 2 weeks. If you can close in 2 weeks, we'll cut you a deal. We'll give you it for 110. You'll say, okay, I would love to do that, but I don't have $110,000. And for me, I never had that kind of money laying around, really. You look at that and you say, okay, I really want to get this property. What do I have to do? And what you would end up doing, if you don't have the money yourself, is you would go find somebody that will fund it for you. And a hard money lender would be that person. So usually you'll take the details of the deal to them. It'll be the address, the square footage, the rents if there are any rents, the expected repairs if you're planning on doing repairs to the property, etc. You would go to them, you would show them all this. They would either agree or disagree to it. In this case, let's say they agree to it and they end up funding the deal. A lot of the places will do like a 90% loan to value or 100%. You won't bring any money down as far as the down payment goes. They'll fund the entire thing. And what you'll bring to the table for closing is paying the funding fee. So if they agree that they want to help you fund this property or this project, they're going to make you pay a funding fee. And the funding fee generally is a percentage of the purchase price. So in this case, you would look at it and you would say, okay, it's $110,000. Let's say they want 4% as the funding fee, which is not uncommon. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less than that. They want 4%. So it's going to be a little over $4,000 that you're going to bring. $4,400 would be the total. You bring that to closing, minus some credits that you will get for whatever taxes and sewer and maybe rent if there's rents being paid, and you'll get a credit for that. Whatever the difference is what you'll bring to closing. Now that you have the property secured, oftentimes the term is about 6 months. They're going to give you a 6-month term, and then during that period of time, every month you're going to pay interest only payments. So you're not going to be paying any principal down. It's just interest. Usually the interest rate is 14-15% right now is what you're going to pay. So on this, you would probably be paying $1,500 a month, a little over $1,500 a month, but roughly that much. And they're going to collect those payments for 6 months. And then at the end of the 6-month term, you're going to have what's called a balloon payment. When that balloon payment comes due, they're going to say, okay, hey man, 6 months is up. You owe us $110,000. And you're going to say, I didn't really think about this part. I don't have $110,000. What do I do now? And they say, okay, no worries. We've got your back. We're looking out for you. If you want, we'll let you stay on this for another 6 months. All you have to do is pay us another funding fee and keep paying us the interest only payments. So now you can see what happens here. If you don't prepare properly, those 6 months are going to come and go a lot faster than you expect. You're going to come to the balloon payment. They're going to expect another $4,400 to extend your loan another 6 months. And now you're paying another 6 months worth of interest only payments. So by the end of it, you paid almost $10,000, $8,800 in funding fees. Plus you paid 12 months worth of interest only payments. And you can see how this can kill a deal really fast. So if you don't know what the hell you're doing when you start, stay the hell away from these programs because they're looking out for you. They're trying to help you out and this and that, but in reality, it's just going to screw you. So you need to stay away from those until you really know what you're doing and you have a plan. If you don't have a plan going in, you're going to get screwed. And ask me how I know. I've done it to myself. I literally ended up doing this 3 times on one deal. And it needed $40,000 worth of basement repairs. I totally messed up the deal. It ate up a ton of money. I profusely apologized to my partners in that deal. I messed it up. Thankfully, we had a bunch of properties to offset my stupid mistake there. But if you're starting out, you don't have a lot of properties to make up for that, and you might be getting screwed. You're not going to be able to afford to weather that storm, and this might be your first and only deal, right? And then you're going to have a bad outlook on the real estate market because your first deal didn't go well. Be very careful. But that is one of the use cases, is you need money quickly to get a deal secured. A lot of times that's how good deals happen, is, hey, I need to close in 2 weeks. If you can do that, we'll strike a deal for X price. The next one would be if you have a short-term equity growth plan. So if you're looking at a property, simply put, a property is worth not a lot because it's bad shape. You take this hard money to get you to the finish line, close the deal, and you're going to fix it up in 6 months, and it's going to be worth more by the end of that period. And if that's the case, then it's going to be okay, because let's say you bought it for 100, it's worth 200, you put 25, 30 grand into it. There's a spread there, right? So you can take that to a bank and you're going to be okay. The thing to be careful with on this one though is, if this is an investment property and you grow the value from $100 to $200,000, you put 30 grand into it, right? So you say, okay, there's a $70,000 spread, I should be good to go. But be very careful, because when you take this to a bank, they're going to say, okay, yeah, we're willing to fund this. We're willing to take this on and take it off hard money, but we want to do it at 75 or 80% loan to value. That would mean that basically the loan size is only going to be 80% of the overall value. So if it appraises for 200 on the dot, let's say they're going to do 80% loan to value, they're only going to give you a loan for 160. So when you start doing the math on this, a lot of times people are including the entire number, right? 100 to 200. But in most cases, they're not going to give you 100% loan to value. They're not going to give you every single penny that you want. And there are some caveats to that, maybe in a VA loan situation, things like that. But for the most part, it's not going to happen. So what you need to budget for is the fact that you bought it for 100 in this just random example. You put 30 into it, and the most you're going to get out from the bank is 160 minus closing fees and all these things. So the spread that you're going to make is actually pretty limited. The way that you could get around that, of course, is if you sold the property or did something else with it. But if you're just looking at refinancing it into a bank or a credit union long term, a lot of people look at it like, okay, it was worth 100 when I bought it. I fixed it up. Now it's worth 200. I'm going to get a loan for 200, but you're oftentimes not going to. And I can almost say with certainty that you're not going to if you're working with the majority of banks out there. Build that into your numbers, because there is going to be a buffer that they're going to want to maintain that you don't have with hard money. So if you, now in another example, let's say you buy it for 100, you put 30 into it, and it's worth 150, you can already see the math isn't going to work out. You're not going to get your money back out of it, because it needs to be 75, 80% loan to value off of the 150 number. So you take 80% or 75% of that number, and it minus what you put into it, you're going to end up upside down basically. So there's a lot of things that can get intricate when you're working with the hard money stuff. It's a great tool, but you need to have a good enough deal that makes it worth it. Otherwise, you're just going to be spinning your wheels. You're going to be spending a ton of money on interest and all these payments to everybody, and it's going to be death by 1,000 cuts. One of the other use cases I would have for these type of programs is if you have cash flow that can support it. If you're buying something that's undervalued enough or has a high enough cash flow that you can eat all these costs associated with hard money and come out the other side okay, then it's really not a big deal, because you're not paying it anyways. So oftentimes you're not going to use hard money for something like this, but maybe you found a deal that cash flows well, it's performing well as a property, but it needs to close quickly, like our first example. This might be a reason to use hard money, but it also has the cash flow to support it. And in that case, I'm not against it at all, because it's not your money anyways. It's really the tenant's money that's paying for it. But as a general rule, you really have to have a great deal for it to make sense. Timelines being compressed sometimes can be people trying to force you to make a bad deal. It works both ways. It can sometimes mean that you're going to get a great deal if you can close in 2 weeks, but it could also be people trying to force your hand and force you to make a decision when you don't have all the information. And that is a dangerous game to play, especially when starting out. Like I said, if you do that on your 101st deal and you have 100 doors, you're going to be okay. More than likely, if it goes bad, you're going to be okay. If you do this on your first or second or third or fourth deal, really going to be tough to recover from that, because you're in a situation where you just don't have enough income and enough equity to offset losses along the way. And they're going to happen. No matter how smart you are, no matter how great you think you are, you're going to make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. There's no perfect game out there. So just keep that in mind. And like I said, the biggest thing I would say to keep in mind is, what is this going to be worth afterwards? And then subtract 20, 25% off the top. So that way you can make sure that you have a buffer there to go get on with a long-term loan solution, which would be with a credit union, with a bank of some sort. A lot of my loans are 5-year adjustable rate mortgages, so it's a 5-year term. At the end of the 5-year term, it's a balloon payment, and long before that ever happens, you're already refinancing it into a new loan. So things to think about there for sure. If you have no experience and no reserve money, which is why a lot of people use hard money, that's the sad reality of this whole thing, is a lot of people use hard money because they have no money to put into their own deal. And if you're doing that, you're playing a very risky game, because if you have anything unexpected happen throughout the course of this deal, you could easily put yourself out of business and have no recourse. Now you're going to lose the property, you're going to lose your credibility, you're going to have your credit score impacted, because a lot of times these are recourse loans, which means that they can come after you personally and impact your own finances personally if you don't perform on this loan. So you're taking a lot of risks that may not be worth it. If your plan is that you're going to fix this house up, it's going to take you 6 months and you might make 5 grand off of it, the margins might be so thin that it doesn't make sense for you to do it. Be very careful with that, because you could easily get yourself upside down without even thinking about it. To add or subtract $5,000 in the course of a renovation is not very hard to do. Anybody that's done it and that's watching right now totally understands what I'm saying. You can easily end up spending that much money. So you really need to look at a deal and make sure you have an appropriate margin, and maybe get some experience. Maybe go work for a house flipper. Maybe go work with somebody in the industry so you can understand what those costs actually look like. Because it's one thing to just kind of look around and say, okay, yeah, I think I know what this costs to fix this place up. But it's another thing when you actually get in there and you're cutting checks for everything that has to get done. If you're buying something with negative cash flow or no cash flow, maybe then there's no tenants in there, non-paying tenants. I've used hard money for many deals like that. When you're doing something like that, it can really work out well if you have a plan. Thankfully, I have a management company that is on top of it. They can get things squared away in a matter of maybe 45 to 60 days. I already baked that into the whole plan, so I know that's going to happen. Hopefully, they can level with the tenants and get them paying again and get things squared away. But if they can't, I'm already prepared for the fact that I'm not going to get any money out of these properties. Thankfully, I have other properties to offset them now, but even starting out, that's why I didn't deal with these kind of deals, because there's so much uncertainty involved with it. How long is it going to take to go through the court system? Are the tenants going to be cooperative at all? Are they going to destroy the units when they leave? These are all things that are real. These are things that happen to people every day. And if you've never done it before and you're buying a deal that's got some sort of complex situation with the tenants and you're going to use hard money to do it, you're paying a lot of interest, you're paying a ton of fees, and now you have tenants that are in a property squatting or just not paying or in some sort of transient situation. And now you have to deal with that. And if you've never dealt with that, or you don't have a team in place that knows how to deal with that, you can really screw yourself fast. And then you're going to be starting all over again. And I think it'd be best to wait for a better deal than to just jump into something because you saw on HGTV or you watched a YouTube video that's made it seem like it was super, super simple. If you're starting out, a lot of times I would say to avoid those kind of deals. But there are cases where maybe I would say to go for it. It really depends on the type of person you are, the type of money that you have. If you have a full-time job, if you don't, if you have some sort of source of income to help support this, then it might be possible. But if you don't have any money, you don't have a job, there's a lot of things you need to square away before you start doing this stuff, because it's high leverage, which generally means high risk. The last kind of negative I would look out for is market softness. If you're buying in a time of year where the market's soft, for me specifically, it's like late fall through early spring, market's pretty soft because it's winter time. Nobody wants to move in winter. So if you're doing flip houses and things like that, I'd be a little careful about it. If it's long-term buy and hold type stuff, then maybe I wouldn't be as worried about the market. But market softness as a whole is something that I would want to pay attention to, because you don't want to get yourself into a high leverage deal when prices are plummeting down. Granted, it takes a lot of time for this stuff to play out, but you want everything in your favor as much as you can control, or as much as you can plan it ahead for, so that way you can limit the downside risk. So I would just say to be very careful with that. If you see that the market's getting soft in your area, there's a lot of migration out of your area, maybe stay away from hard money and stick to something that's more of a long-term solution. Because if you're using long-term debt, you're going to have more eyes on the deal. You're going to have an appraiser come out there. There's going to be checks and balances. And appraisers are something that I think is BS anyways, but I'll talk about that in another video. The idea is that you'll have more oversight on your deal than a hard money lender, which could literally just be somebody that you know that has money. There's no criteria that they have to meet. It's literally just somebody that has money that's willing to borrow it to you, and you make some sort of agreement. So it doesn't have to be an institution. It can just literally be Joe down the street with 100 grand in his bank account. So be very careful with that, because Joe, you might convince Joe that this is a great deal and he should give you the money and this and that. And suddenly you're both in over your heads. You're both upside down. Nobody's happy, and you've just tarnished your reputation with somebody that could potentially lend to you in the future. Just recently, I used a high leverage loan solution to get a duplex and a single family that I closed on last Friday. I used hard money to do that. I paid the funding fee. I did the whole deal. But the reason I did that is because I could close both these properties that were from the same seller in a matter of 2 weeks. I got a really good deal, I think, on the prices. We'll see if that turns out to be true. I could be totally wrong on that, but I think I got a pretty good deal. The reason that I went that direction was because they wanted to close quickly, and I wanted to take both their properties. I wanted both of them to get the maximum deal between the two, and also close on them quickly for this guy. Everyone walked away happy. I've got the two properties I wanted. They got a bunch of money, and I used hard money to do that. So I was willing to pay the funding fee. But even then, before I even close this property, I've already been talking to lenders about where it's going to go for the long term. because I don't want to get to the end of the 6 months, which is so easy to do, and then wake up and be like, oh my God, I didn't set this up at all. And I need 45 days to figure this out. So now I'm going to pay another funding fee. And like I said, you end up in this death spiral of just money flying out the window. So I've learned my lesson from the big mistake I made on that property where I stayed 3 terms with the hard money lender. I learned my lesson there, and now I'm applying those lessons learned now, because it takes about 45 days to close a loan anyways. So you should really be looking at your long-term debt solution no later than probably 4 months into the loan, because you need about 2 months to try to get it all solidified. And that's assuming that everything is stable with the property. So all this to say, hard money lending can be a great solution. It can help you get your foot in the door on deals that you otherwise couldn't access, but it can also be something that can put you upside down before you know it and screw you and really delay your career before it even gets started. So be very careful when you're looking at it. If you've ever used hard money, if you're potentially looking at using hard money, throw something in the comments. I love interacting with people. I'll get back to you and give you my thoughts on it. Otherwise, I appreciate you guys watching this video, as with all the other ones. I'll talk to you guys soon. See ya.